Hey guys, my name is Lauren, if you don't know who I am. I went into this assignment kind of just thinking it's another assignment, wasn't really thinking much of it, and I took so much information from this that I'll be able to use, I think, throughout my whole career, honestly. It was so fun and it was so cool. I got to be on another level almost with the person I interviewed. It was really good information I got, and I really loved this assignment. The person I interviewed with, her name is Shelby McKay. She is an alum from North Central. She's amazing. Literally, I love her voice. She's so good. She's so anointed and knows how to lead worship. So I was really excited to interview with her. She has been my music pastor at Bethel's Rock for 6 years, and I've been leading with her for all 6 years since I was in middle school. Little itty bitty Lauren, but I asked her some questions, and I was some I was really surprised by, some I was kind of figured she'd say that, but just shows how much of a great leader she is by some of the questions I asked. So first I asked her how she looked or viewed at her job, and she said, "First and foremost, I pastor people. Music is just a tool for me to pastor and teach people what it is to cultivate an intimate relationship with Jesus." And that was literally the beginning of our interview, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be a really good interview. It's so true. She does pastor people, and I was one of those people she pastored. She always is loving on people, and just like what she said, is just music is just a tool to cultivate an intimate relationship with Jesus, and I think that's so important to remember, and I think that's something I will take away and remember through all of my next years coming up being a music pastor. And I totally agreed with everything she said for that statement. I am a very big people pleaser and a people person. So during this whole coronavirus thing, it's kind of been a little difficult because I get my energy from people, and so it's been a little tough. And I miss my church people so much. So it's been tough, not seeing people or being able to pastor people, but I can through social media, which is awesome. And that's kind of what she said too in our interview, because I had to do it over FaceTime. But she said pastoring people is so important, and I totally agree with that. Just love people and listen. Sometimes people only want you to listen, and that's great. Sometimes they want input, and she kind of had mentioned that too. Another thing I had asked her is if she expected her job to be what her job is. And I was kind of surprised, kind of not, by what she said. She said no, and I was like, oh, because for me, coming in, I'm a music pastor right now, or worship leader at Bethel's Rock in Farmington. We opened another campus, but I kind of had this expectation, and it is kind of what I expected, maybe because I've been around for a little while at the church, I don't know. But she said no. She said my job is not what I expected it to be. I think coming out of school, I was used to leading worship, but not so much of the leading people part. I had led a team, but leading a larger team and a church body and the multitude of things that become a part of my job was something I was not used to juggling. I think so often, like she said, she just came in thinking oh, I'm just gonna be leading a team, leading worship, but then it was oh, and also being in charge of Serve Week and doing this and doing that, just kind of things that a church does on a regular basis than North Central would, you know what I mean? She was on one accord when that was a thing back then. She was on one accord with Stephen Witt and stuff, and she had mentioned we went to camps, and obviously she encountered God so many times just through all the different messages and everything that was going on. But she said that she just worshiped and led the kids in worship, but she didn't have to do all the behind the scenes stuff that a church would do, and even like chapel. Like she went to chapel and like led chapel, but it wasn't like all this extra stuff like a church full-time job would be. So she said it was kind of like hard to juggle it at first, but you know, her being there 6 years, she got the hang of it, and you know, went week by week and stuff and just learned. Another thing she had mentioned was that she didn't really know much about sound stuff, and by the time she left, she could do like figure out how to mix and EQ, and like even like the light systems we had and everything. She knew how to like figure out all the light stuff and ProPresenter and like all of that stuff, which coming into my job, I was like, didn't know any of this, and I kind of find that like I can relate to her on that, because I've had to learn a lot of that stuff too. And it's great that you can just learn all that stuff on a day-to-day basis. But another thing she mentioned that I kind of had asked, it was kind of a tougher question. I said I grew up at the church, but her answer was like perfect. I grew up at this church, so I kind of thought I knew the ins and outs of stuff, but I asked, how is it working with other staff members? Is there any tension? And she said, one big thing I learned was that everybody operates differently. Learning love languages and personality traits was huge for me. I found that if I took the time to learn how everyone on staff operated, I could respond in a way that would appeal to them and relate to them. It changed the office dynamic tremendously. We were also more efficient. If you're going to have a good staff relationship, there has to be a fun element to it. The day in and the day out of tasks, hard situations, church dynamics, it gets hard. When you add a light-hearted factor to the mix, it builds relationship, chemistry, and unity. That can get you through some really tough seasons in ministry together. I thought that response was like right on, because I know for like a couple of my friends who have gone through some job interviews and stuff, they actually have to take like the Enneagram stuff, just so like people who they work with just know how they work and how they interact with people, or like you know, all the different traits of like your love languages, and what you're good at, what you're not good at, and you guys can help balance each other out. I think that's huge, and that helps eliminate tension through staff members and even like congregational people and stuff. So I thought that was really big, and I love the part where she put there's always like a fun element to it. I remember just like coming in on a random day during their staff work days and stuff, and they would just like take a break and go play like basketball in like the parking lot and stuff. I'm like, this is fun. Like, yes, they do work all the time, but like to be able to connect with the kids pastor and the youth pastor is so incredibly important. And I always loved when I went there and I saw that chemistry. That's like something I wanted. I was like, I want to be here. Like, I want to be working at a church that's like this. And I think that was huge for me going into the role I'm in right now. And that's what she said too. She was like, I can't imagine if I was at like a different place or didn't have the chemistry she had with the people, because it wouldn't have been fun in a sense, you know? So I thought that was really cool. She had mentioned that. And I think having relationships with people like your staff or people in your congregation is so incredibly important. And that kind of all ties back to what she said in the very beginning, is she's pastoring people. And that can even be like pastoring some of the people like on her staff, like on staff. And they can lean on each other, they can push her. They're kind of like in a, you know, keep each other accountable. And I think that's so incredibly important. As far as her worship leading went, I volunteered for 6 years with her and led with her, and like it was, I just knew everything she did, like, or she did/does, and how she works and stuff like that. And I, you know, ran into a problem a couple weeks ago of like another person, and there was just like tension, and I kind of thought back to like what would Shelby do in this moment. And I think that was like a huge compliment to her, and like how she always used to handle stuff, because she always did it out of kindness and never made anybody feel less than, or like that they didn't belong, and she always took people's thoughts in account and stuff like that. And so I think that was incredibly important. And I appreciate her and her leadership that she showed towards me and towards our congregation, towards people. So I had a lot of takeaways from this project, and I am so glad I did this interview with her. So I learned so much, and I honestly want to interview a lot more other people because it's just interesting what people say and how they view their work and stuff like that. So hope you enjoyed. Love you all. Miss you all.